Good wishes to all of you. History of Medieval India, Chapter 15, India in the first half of the 17th century. Political and administrative developments in India. The first half of the 17th century in India was, on the whole, an era of progress and growth. During the period, the Mughal Empire was ruled by two capable rulers, Jahangir 1605 to 27 and Shah Jahan 1628 to 1658. In southern India, too, as we have seen, the states of Bijapur and Golconda were able to provide conditions of internal peace and cultural growth. The Mughal rulers consolidated the administrative system which had developed under Akbar. They maintained the alliance with the Rajputs and tried to further broaden the political base of the empire by allying with powerful sections such as the Afghans and the Marathas. They embellished their capitals with beautiful buildings, many of them in marble, and tried to make the Mughal court the center of the cultural life in the country. The Mughals played a positive role in stabilizing India's relations with the neighboring Asian powers such as Iran, the Uzbeks, and the Ottoman Turks, thereby opening up greater avenues for India's foreign trade. Trade concessions given to various European trading companies were also aimed at promoting India's foreign trade, but a number of negative features came to the surface during the period. The growing prosperity of the ruling classes did not filter down to peasants and workers, whose lives remained hard and miserable. The Mughal ruling class remained oblivious to the growth of science and technology in the West. The problem of succession to the throne created instability, thus posing a threat to the political system as well as to economic and cultural growth. Jahangir, the eldest son of Akbar, succeeded to the throne without any difficulty, his younger brothers having died during the lifetime of Akbar due to excessive drinking. However, shortly after Jahangir's succession, his eldest son Khusro broke out into rebellion. Tussle between father and son for the throne was not unusual in those times. Jahangir himself had rebelled against his father and kept the empire disturbed for some time. However, Khusro's rebellion proved to be short lived. Jahangir defeated him at a battle near Lahore and soon afterwards he was captured and imprisoned. We have already seen how Jahangir brought to an end the conflict with the Mewar, which had continued for 4 decades, and the struggle in the Deccan with the Malik Ambar, who was not prepared to accept the settlement made by Akbar. There was conflict in the east too, although Akbar had broken the back of the power of the Afghans in this region. Afghan chiefs were still powerful in various parts of East Bengal. They had the support of many Hindu Rajas of the region, such as the Rajas of Jessore, Kamrup, Western Assam, Kachor, etc. Towards the end of his reign, Akbar had recalled Raja Mansingh, the governor of Bengal, to the court, and during his absence, the Afghan chief Usman Khan and others found an opportunity to raise a rebellion. Jahangir sent Man Singh back for some time, but the situation continued to worsen. In 1608, Jahangir posted to Bengal Islam Khan, the grandson of Sheikh Salim Chishti, the famous Sufi saint who was the patron saint of the Mughals. Though young in years, Islam Khan handled the situation with great energy and foresight. He won over many of the jamindars, including the Raja of Jessore, to his side and fixed his headquarters at Dhaka, which was strategically located to deal with the rebels to keep the area under full control. Soon the provincial capital was transferred from Rajmahal to Dhaka, which began to develop rapidly. Islam Khan first directed his efforts to the conquest of Sonargaon, which was under the control of Musa Khan and his confederates, who were called the Barahatwal Bhuyan. After their years of campaigning, Sonargaon was captured. Soon afterwards, Musa Khan surrendered and he was sent to the court as a prisoner. Usman Khan's turn came next and he was defeated in a fierce battle. The back of the Afghan resistance was now broken and the other rebels soon surrendered. The principalities of Jessore and Kamrup were annexed. Thus, Mughal power was firmly entrenched in East Bengal. Like Akbar, Jahangir realized that conquest would be lasting on the basis not of force but of securing the goodwill of the people. He therefore treated the defeated Afghan chiefs and their followers with consideration and sympathy. After some time, many of the princes and zamindars of Bengal detained at the court were released and allowed to return to Bengal. Even Musa Khan was released and his estates restored. Thus, after a long spell, peace and prosperity returned to Bengal. To cap the process, more Afghans now began to be inducted into the Mughal nobility. The leading Afghan noble under Jahangir was Khan Aijahan Lodi, who rendered distinguishing service in the Deccan. By 1622, Jahangir had brought Malik Amber to heel, patched up the long drawn out tussle with Mewar, and pacified Bengal. Jahangir was still fairly young, 51, and a long era of peace seemed to be ahead. But the situation was changed radically by two developments: the Persian conquest of Kandahar, which was a blow to Mughal prestige, and the growing failure of Jahangir's health, which unleashed the latent struggle for succession among the princes and led to jockeying for power by the nobles. These developments pitchforked Noor Jahan into the political arena. Noor Jahan. The story of Noor Jahan's life, her first marriage with an Iranian Sher Afghan and his death in a clash with the Mughal governor of Bengal. Noor Jahan's stay in Agra with an elderly relation of Jahangir and her marriage with Jahangir 4 years later, 1611, are too well known to be repeated in detail here. Serious historians do not believe that Jahangir was responsible for the death of her first husband. Jahangir's chance meeting with her in the Meena Bazar and subsequent marriage with her was not so unusual. Her family was a respectable one, and her father, Itimadullah, had been made joint Diwan by Jahangir in the first year of his reign. After a brief eclipse due to the involvement of one of his sons with the Khusro's rebellion, he had been restored to his position. Having been tested in this office and following Nur Jahan's marriage with Jahangir, he was raised to the office of the chief diwan. Other members of the family also benefited from this alliance, their mansabs being augmented. Itimadullah proved to be able, competent, and loyal, and wided considerable influence in the affairs of the state till his death 10 years later. Nur Jahan's brother Asaf Khan was also a learned and able man. He was appointed the Khan I Saman, a post reserved for nobles in whom the emperor had full confidence. He married his daughter to Khurram Shah Jahan, who was his father's favorite following the rebellion and imprisonment of Khusrau. Some modern historians are of the opinion that, along with her father and brother, and in alliance with Khurram, Noor Jahan formed a group or junta which managed Jahangir so that without its backing and support, no one could advance in his career, and that this led to the division of the court into two factions, the Noor Jahan junta and its opponents. It is further argued that Noor Jahan's political ambitions ultimately resulted in a breach between her and Shah Jahan, and that this drove Shah Jahan into rebellion against his father in 1622, since he felt that Jahangir was completely under Noor Jahan's influence. However, some other historians do not agree with this view. They point out that till 1622, when Jahangir's health broke down, all the important political decisions were taken by Jahangir himself, as is clear from his autobiography. The precise political role of Noor Jahan during this period is not clear. Coins were issued in her name, and she was given the title of Badshah Begum. Important nobles used to call on her to apprise her of events and to secure her intervention with the emperor. She dominated the royal household and set new fashions based on Persian traditions. On account of her position, Persian art and culture acquired great prestige at the court. Noor Jahan was the constant companion of Jahangir and even joined him in his hunting expedition since she was a good rider and a sure shot. As such, she could influence Jahangir, and many people approached her to intercede with the king on their behalf. Under Mughal rule, no woman had reached such an important position earlier, but Jahangir was not dependent on the junta or on Nur Jahan, as is also borne out by the fact that nobles who were not favorite of the junta continued to get their normal promotions. The rise of Shah Jahan was due to his personal qualities and achievements rather than the backing of Nur Jahan. Shah Jahan had his own ambitions of which Jahangir was not unaware. In any case, in those times, no ruler could afford to allow a noble or a prince to become too powerful lest he challenged his authority. This was the basic reason for the conflict between Jahangir and Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan's rebellion. The immediate cause of the rebellion was Shah Jahan's refusal to proceed to Kandahar, which had been besieged by the Persians. Shah Jahan was afraid that the campaign would be a long and difficult one and that intrigues would be hatched against him during his absence from the court. Hence, he put forward a number of demands, such as full command of the army, which included the veterans of the Deccan, complete sway over the Punjab, control over the number of important forts, etc. Jahangir was enraged by this attitude. Convinced that the prince was meditating rebellion, he wrote harsh letters and took punitive steps which only made the situation worse and resulted in an open breach. From Mandu, where he was stationed, Shah Jahan made a sudden dash on Agra in order to capture the treasurers lodged there. Shah Jahan had the full backing of the Deccan army and all the nobles posted there. Gujarat and Malwa had declared for him, and he had the support of his father in law, Asaf Khan, and a number of important nobles at the court. However, in the battle near Delhi, Shah Jahan was defeated by the forces led by Mahab- Mahabad Khan. He was saved from complete defeat by the valiant stand of the Mewar contingent. Another army was sent to wrest Gujarat from Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan was hounded out of the Mughal territories and compelled to take shelter with his erstwhile enemies, the Deccani rulers. However, he crossed the Deccan into Odisha, took the governor by surprise, and soon Bengal and Bihar were under his control. Muhammad Khan was again pressed into service. He took energetic steps and compelled Shah Jahan to retreat into the Deccan again. This time he made an alliance with Malik Ambar, who was once again at war with the Mughals. However, soon Shah Jahan wrote abject letters of apology to Jahangir. Jahangir also felt that it was time to pardon and conciliate his ablished and most energetic son. As part of the agreement, two of Shah Jahan's sons, Dara and Aurangzeb, were sent to the court as hostages, and a tract in the Deccan was assigned for Shah Jahan's expenses. This was in 1626. Mahabad Khan. Shah Jahan's rebellion kept the empire distracted for 4 years, resulted in the loss of Kandahar, and emboldened the Deccanites to recover all the territories surrendered to the Mughals during Akbar's time and in subsequent campaigns. It also pointed to a basic weakness of the system. A successful prince tended to become a rival focus of power, particularly when it was felt that the monarch was not able or willing to wield the supreme power himself. Shah Jahan's constant charge was that following Jahangir's failing health, all effective power had slipped into the hands of Nur Jahan Begum, a charge which is difficult to accept since Shah Jahan's father-in-law. Asaf Khan was the imperial divan. Also, though in poor health, Jahangir was still mentally alert and no decision could be taken without his concurrence. Jahangir's illness created the further danger that an ambitious noble might try to use the situation to gather supreme power in his hands. An unexpected episode brought this to the fore. Mahabad Khan, who had played a leading role in dealing with the Shah Jahan's rebellion, had been feeling disgruntled because certain elements at the court were eager to clip his wings following the end of the prince's rebellion. Summoned to the court to render accounts, Mahabad Khan came with a trusted body of Rajputs and seized the emperor at an opportune moment when the royal camp was crossing the river Jhelum on its way to Kabul. Nur Jahan, who had not been apprehended, escaped across the river, but an assault against Mahabad Khan failed. Nur Jahan now tried other ways. She surrendered herself to Mahabad Khan in order to be close to Jahangir. Within 6 months, taking advantage of the mistakes committed by Mahabad Khan, who was a soldier but not a diplomat or an administrator, and due to the growing unpopularity of his Rajput soldiers, Nur Jahan was able to win away most of the nobles from Mahabad Khan's side. Realizing his precarious position, Mahabad Khan abandoned Jahangir and fled from the court. Some time later, he joined Shah Jahan in the Deccan, where he was biding his time. The defeat of Mahabad Khan was the greatest victory attained by Nur Jahan, and it was due in no small measure to her cool courage and sagacity. However, Nur Jahan's triumph was short lived, for in less than a year's time, Jahangir breathed his last not far from Lahore, 1627. The wily and shrewd Asaf Khan, who had been appointed Walik by Jahangir and who had been carefully preparing the ground for the succession of his son in law, Shah Jahan, now came into the open. Supported by the Diwan, the chief nobles, and the army, he made Nur Jahan a virtual prisoner and sent urgent summons to Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan reached Agra and was enthroned amidst great rejoicing. Earlier, at his instance, all his rival including his imprisoned brother, cousins, etc., were done to death. This precedent and the earlier precedent of a son rebelling against his father, begun by sorry, which was begun by Jahangir and was followed by Shah Jahan, was to lead to bitter consequences for the Mughal dynasty. Shah Jahan himself was to reap the bitter seeds he had sown. As for Nur Jahan, after attaining the throne, Shah Jahan fixed his settlement upon her. She lived in a retired life till her death 18 years later and was buried at Lahore. Shah Jahan's reign 1628 to 58 was full of many sided activities. We have already studied his Deccan policy. We shall now turn to the foreign policy of the Mughals, which reached a high watermark under Shah Jahan. Foreign policy of the Mughals. We have seen how, following the breakup of the Timurid Empire in the second half of the 15th century, three powerful empires, the Uzbek, the Safavid, and the Ottoman, established themselves in Trans-Oxian Central Asia, Iran, and Turkey. The Uzbeks were the natural enemies of the Mughals, having been responsible for the expulsion of Babur and the other Timurid princes from Samarkand and the adjoining area, including Khorasan. At the same time, the Uzbeks clashed with the rising power of the Safavids, who claimed Khorasan. The Khorasanian plateau linked Iran with Central Asia, and the trade routes to China and India passed across it. It was natural for the Safavids and the Mughals to ally against the Uzbek danger, especially as there were no frontier disputes between them. With the exception of Kandahar, the Uzbeks tried to exploit the sectarian differences with the Safavid rulers of Iran, who had ruthlessly persecuted the Sunnis. Both the Uzbek and the Mughal rulers were Sunnis, but the Mughals were too broad minded to be swayed by sectarian differences. Annoyed at the alliance of the Mughals with a Shia power with Iran, the Uzbeks occasionally stirred up the fanatic Afghan and Baluchi tribesmen living in the northwest frontier tracts between Peshawar and Kabul against the Mughals. The most powerful empire in West Asia at the time was that of the Ottoman Turks. The Ottoman or the Usmanid Turks, so called after the name of their first ruler, Usman D. 1326, had overrun Asia Minor and Eastern Europe and also conquered Syria, Egypt, and Arabia by 1529, they had received the title Sultan of Rum from the shadowy Caliph living in Cairo. Later, they also assumed the title of Padshah-i-Islam. The rise of a Shiite power in Iran made the Ottoman sultans conscious of the danger to their eastern flank and that the rise of the Safavids would encourage the schism in their own territories. In 1514, the Turkish Sultan defeated the Shah of Iran in a famous battle. The Ottomans clashed with Iran for the control of Baghdad and also for the areas in North Iran around Yerevan. They gradually extended their control on the coastal areas around Arabia and made a bid to oust the Portuguese from the Persian Gulf and the Indian waters. The Ottoman threat from the west made the Persians keen to befriend the Mughals, particularly when they had to face an aggressive Uzbek power in the east. The Mughals refused the Uzbek proposal for a tripartite Ottoman Mughal Uzbek alliance against the Persians, as it would have upset the Asian balance of power and left them alone to face the might of the Uzbeks. Alliance with Iran was also helpful in promoting trade with Central Asia. If the Mughals had a stronger navy, they might perhaps have sought a closer alliance with Turkey, which was also a naval power and was engaged in a struggle against the navies of the European powers in the Mediterranean. As it was, the Mughals were chary of a closer relationship with Turkey since they were not prepared to countenance the claim to superiority made by the Turkish Sultan as successor to the Caliph. These were some of the factors which shaped the foreign policy of the Mughals, Akbar and the Uzbeks. In 1510, following the defeat of the Uzbek chief Saibhani Khan by the Safavids, Babur had briefly regained Samarkand. Although Babur had to leave the city after the Uzbeks had inflicted a sharp defeat on the Persians, the help extended to him by the Persian monarch established a tradition of friendship between the Mughals and the Safavids. Later, Humayun too received help from the Safavid monarch Shah, Shah Tahmasp when he had sought refuge at his court after being ousted from India by Sher Shah. The territorial power of the Uzbeks grew rapidly in the 1570s under Abdul Khan Uzbek. In 1572 to 73, Abdul Khan Uzbek seized back, which, along with Badakhshan, he had served as a kind of a buffer between the Mughals and the Uzbeks. In 1577, Abdullah Khan sent an embassy to Akbar proposing to partition Iran after the death of Shah Tahmasp 1576. Iran was passing through a phase of anarchy and disorder. Abdullah Uzbek argued that Akbar should lead an expedition from India to Iran in order that they may, with united efforts, release Iraq, Khorasan, and Fars from the innovators, Shias. Akbar was not moved by this appeal to sectarian narrowness. A strong Iran was essential to keep the restless Uzbeks in their place. At the same time, Akbar had no desire to get embroiled with the Uzbeks unless they directly threatened Kabul or the Indian possessions. This was the key to Akbar's foreign policy. Abdullah Uzbek also approached the Ottoman Sultan and proposed a tripartite alliance of Sunni powers against Iran. As if in reply to this, Akbar sent a return embassy to Abdullah Uzbek in which it was pointed out that differences in law and religion could not be regarded as sufficient ground for conquest. Regarding difficulties faced by pilgrims to Mecca, he pointed, he pointed out that with the conquest of Gujarat, a new route had been opened for Hajj pilgrims. He also emphasized the old friendship with Iran and admonished Abdullah Khan Uzbek for making insulting references to the Safavids. Akbar's growing interest in Central Asian affairs was reflected in his giving refuge at his court to the Timurid prince Mirza Sulaiman, who had been ousted from Badakhshan by his grandson Abul Fazl says that the Khyber Pass was made fit for wheeled traffic and that due to fear of the Mughals, the gates of Balkh were usually kept closed in order to forestall the invasion of Badakhshan. Abdul Uzbek fomented trouble among the tribesmen of the northwest frontier through his agent Jalal, who was a religious fanatic. The situation became so serious that Akbar had to move to Attock. It was during these operations that Akbar lost one of his best friends, Raja Birbal, in a battle in the Khyber Pass. In 1585, Abdul Uzbek suddenly conquered Badakhshan. Both Mirza Sulaiman and his grandson sought refuge at Akbar's court and were given suitable mansabs. Meanwhile, with the death of his half-brother Mirza Hakim, 1585, Akbar annexed Kabul to his dominance. Thus, the Mughal and the Uzbek frontier ran side by side. Abdul Khan Uzbek now sent another embassy, which Akbar received while he was at Attock on the river Indus. Akbar's continual presence so near the frontier had made Abdullah Uzbek uneasy. Meanwhile, the Uzbeks succeeded in capturing from Iran most of the areas they had coveted in Khorasan. In this situation, it appeared best to Akbar to come to terms with the Uzbek chief. Hence, he sent one of his agents to Abdullah Khan Uzbek with a letter and a verbal message. It seems that an agreement was made defining the Hindu Kush as the boundary between the two. It implied the Mughals giving up their interest in Badakhshan and Balkh, which had been ruled by Timurid princes till 1585. But it also implied the Uzbeks not claiming Kabul and Kandahar. Though neither party gave up its claims formally, the agreement gave the Mughals a defensible frontier on the Hindu Kush. Akbar completed his objective of establishing a scientific defensible frontier by acquiring Kandahar in 1595. In addition to this, from 1586, Akbar stayed at Lahore in order to watch the situation. He left for Agra only after the death of Abdullah Khan Uzbek in 1598. After the death of Abdullah, the Uzbeks broke up into warring principalities and ceased to be a threat to the Mughals for a considerable time. Relations with Iran and the question of Kandahar. The dread of Uzbek power was the most potent factor which brought the Safavids and the Mughals together. Despite the Uzbek attempt to raise anti-Shia sentiments against Iran and the Mughal dislike of the intolerant policies adopted by the Safavid rulers, the only trouble spot between the two was Kandahar, the possession of which was claimed by both on strategic and economic grounds as well as on considerations of sentiment and prestige. Kandahar had been a part of the Timurid Empire and had been ruled over by Babur's cousins, the rulers of Hard, till they were ousted by the Uzbeks in 1507. Strategically, Kandahar was vital for the defense of Kabul. The fort of Kandahar was considered one of the strongest forts in the region and was well provided with water. Situated at the junction of roads leading to Kabul and Herat, Kandahar dominated the whole southern Afghanistan and occupied a position of immense strategic importance. A modern commented, sorry, commentator has observed the Kabul Ghazni Kandahar line represented a strategic and logical frontier. Beyond Kabul and Khyber, there was no natural line of defense. Moreover, the possession of Kandahar made it easier to control the Afghan and Baloch tribes. After the conquest of Sindh and Balochistan by Akbar, the strategic and economic importance of Kandahar for the Mughals increased. Kandahar was a rich and fertile province and was the hub of the movement of men and goods between India and Central Asia. They traded from Central Asia to Multan via Kandahar and thence down the river Indus to the sea. Steadily gained in importance because the roads across Iran were frequently disturbed due to wars and internal commotions. Akbar wanted to promote trade on this route and pointed out to Abdul Uzbek that it was an alternative route for pilgrims and goods traffic to Mecca. Taking all these factors into account, it would appear that Kandar was not as important to the Persians as to the Mughals. For Iran, Kandar was more of an outpost, an important one, no doubt, rather than a vital bastion in a defense system. In the early phase, however, the dispute over Kandar was not allowed to affect good relations between the two countries. Kandar came under Babur's control in 1522 when the Uzbeks were threatening Khuzestan once again. Shah Tahmasp captured Kandar, taking advantage of the confusion following Humayun's death. Akbar made no effort to regain it till the Uzbeks under Abdullah Uzbek posed a renewed threat to Iran and to the Mughals. The Mughal conquest of Kandahar 1595 was not a part of an agreement between Akbar and the Uzbeks to partition the Persian Empire. As some modern historians have argued, it was more to establish a viable defensive line in the northwest against possible Uzbek invasion. Since Kusaran had passed under Uzbek control by that time and Kandar was cut off from Persia. Relations between Iran and the Mughals continued to be cordial despite the Mughal conquest of Kandar. Shah Abbas I ruled 1588 to 1629, who was perhaps the greatest of the Safavid rulers, was keen to maintain good relations with the Mughals. There was a regular exchange of embassies and costly gifts, including rarities. Relations between Iran and the Mughals continued to be cordial despite the Mughal conquest of Kandahar. Shah Abbas I ruled 1588 to 1629, who was perhaps the greatest of the Safavid rulers, was keen to maintain good relations with the Mughals. There was a regular exchange of embassies and costly gifts, including rarities, between him and Jahangir. Shah Abbas also established close diplomatic and commercial relations with the Deccan states, but this was not objected to by Jahangir. Neither side felt threatened, and there is an imaginary portrait by a court artist showing Jahangir and Shah Abbas embracing each other, with a globe of the world beneath their feet. Culturally, too, the two countries came even closer to each other during the period with the active help of Nur Jahan. But the alliance proved to be more useful to Shah Abbas than to Jahangir, for it led the latter to neglect cultivating friendship with the Uzbek chiefs as he felt secure in the friendship of his brother Shah Abbas in 1620. Shah Abbas sent a polite request for the restoration of Kandar and made preparations for attacking it. Jahangir was taken by surprise, for he was diplomatically isolated and militarily unprepared. Hasty preparations for the relief of Kandar were undertaken, but Prince Shah Jahan put forward impossible demands before he moved march. As a result, Kandar passed into the hands of the Persians 1622. Although Shah Abbas tried to erase the bitterness over the relations between Iran and the Mughals continued to be cordial despite the Mughal conquest of Kandar. Shah Abbas I ruled 1588 to 1629, who was perhaps the greatest of the Safavid rulers, was keen to maintain good relations with the Mughals. There was a regular exchange of embassies and costly gifts, including rarities, between him and Jahangir. Shah Abbas also established close diplomatic and commercial relations with the Deccan states, but this was not objected to by Jahangir. Neither side felt threatened, and there is an imaginary portrait by a court artist showing Jahangir and Shah Abbas embracing each other with a globe of the world beneath their feet. Culturally, too, the two countries came even closer to each other during the period with the active help of Nur Jahan, but the alliance proved to be more useful to Shah Abbas than to Jahangir. For it led the latter to neglect cultivating friendship with the Uzbek chiefs as he felt secure in the friendship of his brother Shah Abbas. In 1620, Shah Abbas sent a polite request for the restoration of Kandahar and made preparations for attacking it. Jahangir was taken by surprise, for he was diplomatically isolated and militarily unprepared. Hasty preparations for the relief of Kandahar were undertaken, but Prince Shah Jahan put forward impossible demands before he would march. As a result, Kandahar passed into the hands of the Persians 1622. Although Shah Abbas tried to erase the bitterness over the loss of Kandahar by sending a lavish embassy to Jahangir and offered facile explanations which were accepted by Jahangir formally, the cordiality which had marked the Mughal relations with Iran came to an end. After the death of Shah Abbas 1629, there was disturbance in Iran. Taking advantage of this, and after being free of Deccan affairs, Shah Jahan induced Ali Mardan Khan, the Persian governor of Kandahar, to defeat to the side of the Mughals 1638. Shah Jahan's bulk campaign, but the conquest of Kandahar was only the means to an end. Shah Jahan was more concerned with the serious danger of recurrent Uzbek attacks on Kabul and the intrigues with her Baloch and Afghan tribes. At the time, both Bokhara and Balkh had come under the control of Nasir Muhammad. Nazar Muhammad and his son Abdul Aziz were ambitious and had launched a series of attacks with the help of Afghan tribesmen for gaining control of Kabul and Ghazni. However, soon afterwards, Abdul Aziz headed a rebellion against his father, and only Balkh remained under the control of Nasir Muhammad, who appealed to Shah Jahan for help secured from the side of the Persians. Shah Jahan accepted the appeal with alacrity. He moved from Lahore to Kabul and deputed a large army under Prince Murad to help Nasir Muhammad. The army, which consisted of 50,000 horses and 10,000 footmen, including musketeers, rocketeers, and gunners, and a contingent of Rajputs, left Kabul in the middle of 1646. Shah Jahan had carefully instructed Prince Murad to treat Nasir Muhammad with great consideration and to restore bulk to him if he behaved with modesty and submission. Further, if Nazir Muhammad expressed a desire to regain Samarkand and Bokhara, the prince was to do everything to help him. Obviously, Shah Jahan wanted a friendly ruler at Bokhara who looked at the who looked to the Mughals for help and support. But Murad's impetuosity ran the plan. plan. He marched in bulk without waiting for instructions from Nasir Muhammad and ordered his men to enter the fort of Balkh in which Nasir Muhammad was residing. Uncertain of the prince's intentions, Nasir Muhammad fled. The Mughals were forced to occupy Balkh and hold it in the face of a sullen and hostile population. Nor was an alternative to Muhammad easily available. Abdul Aziz, son of Nazar Muhammad, raised the Uzbek tribes against the Mughals in Transoxana and mustered an army of 120,000 men across the river Oxus. Meanwhile, Prince Murad, who had been pinging for home, was replaced by Prince Aurangzeb. The Mughals made no effort to defend the Oxus since it was easily fordable. Instead, they placed pickets at strategic places and kept the main force together so that it could march easily to any threatened point. Abdul Aziz crossed the Oxus, but in a running battle, the Mughals routed the Uzbeks outside the gates of Balkh 1647. The victory of the Mughals at Balkh paved the way for negotiations with the Uzbeks. The Uzbek supporters of Abdul Aziz melted away, and he now made overtures to the Mughals. Nad Muhammad, who had taken refuge in Persia, also approached the Mughals for the restoration of his empire. After careful consideration, Shah Jahan decided in favor of Nazar Muhammad, but Nazar Muhammad was first asked to make an apology and humble submission to Prince Aurangzeb. This was a mistake since the proud Uzbek ruler was unlikely to demean himself in this way, particularly when he knew that it was impossible for the Mughals to hold on to bulk for any length of time. After waiting vainly for Nazar Muhammad to appear personally, the Mughals left Balkh in October 1647 since winter was fast approaching and there was no supplies in Balkh. The retreat nearly turned into a rout with hostile bands of Uzbeks hovering around. Though the Mughals suffered grievous losses, the firmness of Aurangzeb prevented a disaster. The Balkh campaign of Shah Jahan has led to considerable controversy among modern historians. From the foreign account, it should be clear that Shah Jahan was not attempting to fix the Mughal frontier on the so called scientific line. The Amud area, the Amud area, as we have seen, was hardly a defensible land, nor was Shah Jahan motivated by the desire to conquer Samarkand and Farghana. The Mughal homelands, though the Mughal emperors frequently talked about it. Shah Jahan's objective, it seems, was to secure a friendly ruler in Balkh and Badakhshan, the areas which bordered Kabul and which had been ruled over the Timurid princes till 1585. This, he believed, would also help in controlling the disaffection of the Afghan tribes living around Ghazni and in the Khyber Pass. The campaign was a The campaign was a success in the military since the Mughals conquered Balkh and defeated Uzbek attempts to oust them. This was the first significant victory of Indian arms in the region, and Shah Jahan had reasons to celebrate it. However, it was beyond the strength of the Mughals to maintain their influence at Balkh for any length of time. Politically, also, it was difficult to do so in the face of sullen Persian hostility and an unfriendly local population. All in all, while the Balkh campaign raised the prestige of Mughal arms for a time, it gained them little political advantage. Perhaps it would have been more advantageous to the Mughals and would have saved considerable expenditure of men and money if Shah Jahan had firmly adhered to, adhered to the Kabul Ghazni Kandahar line so laboriously established by Akbar. As ruler of Balkh, Nazar Muhammad remained friendly to the Mughals as long as he was alive, and there was a constant exchange of envoys between the two. Thus, the Balkh expedition did prevent the rise of an united Uzbek state, which would have been a danger to the Mughals at Kabul. Mughal Persian relations, the last phase. The setback in Balkh led to a revival of Uzbek hostility in the Kabul region and Afghan tribal unrest in the Khyber Ghazni area and emboldened the Persian to attack and conquer Kandahar 1649. This was a big blow to Shah Jahan's pride and he launched three major campaigns one by one under Princes of Blood to try and recover Kandahar. The first attack was launched by Aurangzeb, the hero of Balkh, with an army of 50,000. Though the Mughals defeated the Persians outside the fort, they could not conquer in the face of determined Persian opposition. A second attempt led by Aurangzeb 3 years later also failed. The most grandiloquent effort was made the following year, 1653, under Dara, the favorite son of Shah Jahan. Dara had made many boastful claims, but he was unable to stir the fort into a surrender with the
help of his large army and an attempt at capturing it with the help of two of the biggest guns in the empire, which had been towered to Kandahar, was also to no avail. The failure of the Mughals at Kandahar did not reflect the weakness of Mughal artillery, as has been asserted by some historians. It rather showed the inherent strength of Kandahar fort if held by a determined commander and the ineffectiveness of medieval artillery against strong forts. This was also the Mughal experience in the Deccan. It may, however, be argued that Shah Jahan's attachment to Kandahar was more sentimental than realistic, with the growing enfeeblement of both the Uzbeks and the Safavids. Kandahar no longer had the same strategic importance that it had earlier. It was not so much the loss of Kandahar as the failure of the repeated Mughal efforts which affected the Mughal prestige, but even this should not be unduly exaggerated, for the Mughal Empire remained at the height of its power and prestige during Aurangzeb's reign. Even the proud Ottoman Sultan sent an ambassador to Aurangzeb in 1680 to seek his support. Aurangzeb decided not to continue the futile contest over Kandahar and quietly resumed diplomatic relations with Iran. However, in 1668, Shah Abbas II, the ruler of Iran, insulted the Mughal envoy, made disparaging remarks about Aurangzeb, and even threatened an invasion. There was a flurry of Mughal activity in the Punjab and Kabul. But before any action could take place, Shah Abbas II died. His successors were non entities, and all Persian danger to the Indian frontier disappeared till a new ruler. Nadir Shah came to power more than 50 years later. It will thus be seen that on the whole the Mughals succeed in maintaining a scientific frontier in the northwest based on the Hindu Kush with Kandahar as its outer bastion. Thus, their foreign policy was based on their defense of India. The defense of this frontier line was further buttressed by diplomatic means. Friendship with Persia was its keynote. Despite temporary setbacks over the question of Kandahar, the oft proclaimed desire to recover the Mughals' homelands was really used as a diplomatic ploy, for it was never seriously pursued. The military and diplomatic means adopted by the Mughals were remarkably successful in giving India security from foreign invaders for a long time. Secondly, the Mughals insisted on relations of equality with the leading Asian nations of the time, both with the Safavids, who claimed a special position by virtue of their relationship with the Prophet, and with the Ottoman sultans, who had assumed the title of Padshah-i-Islam and claimed to be the successors of the Caliph of Baghdad. Thirdly, the Mughals used their foreign policy to promote India's commercial interests. Kabul and Kandahar were the twin gateways of India's trade with Central Asia. Growth of administration, Mansabdari system, and the Mughal army. The administrative, machinery, and revenue system developed by Akbar was maintained under Jahangir and Shah Jahan with minor modifications. Important changes were, however, effected in the functioning of the Mansabdari system. Under Akbar, for the maintenance of his contingent, the Mansabdar was paid at the average rate of Rs 240 per annum per Sawar. Later, in the time of Jahangir, it was reduced to Rs 200 per annum. The Mansabdar was allowed to retain 5% of the total salary bill of the Sawars in order to meet various contingent expenses. The Mughals favored mixed contingents with men draw in fixed proportions from Irani and Turani Mughals. Indian Afghans and Rajputs, this was to break the spirit of tribal to or ethnic exclusiveness. However, in special circumstances, a Mughal or a Rajput Mansabdar was allowed to have a contingent drawn exclusively from Mughals or Rajputs, as we have noted. A number of other modifications were also carried out during the period. There was a tendency to reduce Jat salaries. Jahangir introduced a system whereby Selected nobles could be allowed to maintain a large quota for troopers without raising their Jat rank. This was the Du Aspalchil, sorry, Du Aspa se Asap system, literally trooper with two or three horses, which implied that a Mansabdar holding this rank had to maintain and was paid for double the quota of troopers indicated by his Sabar rank. Thus, a Mansabdar holding a Jat rank of 3000 and 3000 Savars due Asap would be required to maintain 6,000 troopers normally. No Mansabdar was given a Savar rank which was higher than his Jat rank. A further modification which comes to our notice during Shah Jahan's reign was aimed at drastically reducing the number of Savan a noble was required to maintain. Thus, a noble was expected to maintain a quota of only one third of his Savar rank, and in some circumstances one fourth. Thus, a noble who had the rank of 3000 Jat, 3000 Savar would maintain not more than 1000 troopers, but this would be doubled. That is, he would maintain 2000 troopers if his rank was 3000 Savar due Aspa Siv Asap Aspa. Although the salaries of the Mansabdars were stated in rupees, they were generally not paid in cash, but by assigning them a Jagir, Mansabdars preferred a Jagir because cash payments were likely to be delayed and sometimes entitled a lot of harassment. Also, control over land was a mark of social prestige by devising a careful scale of graduations and laying down meticulous rules of business. The Mughals bureaucratized the nobility, but they could not take away their feudal attachment to land. This, as we shall see, was one of the dilemmas facing the Mughal nobility. For purposes of assigning jagirs, the revenue department had to maintain a register indicating the assessed income jama of various areas. The account, however, was not indicated in rupees but in dams, which was calculated at the rate of 40 dams to a rupee. This document was called the Jama Dami or assessed income based on dams. As the number of Mansabdars kept growing and the financial resources of the state were strained on account of a number of reasons, even the modifications mentioned above were not found adequate. Drastic cuts in salaries all round would have created disaffection among the nobles, which the rulers could ill afford. Hence, the quota of troopers and horses a noble had to maintain out of his Savar rank was further reduced by a new scaling device. The salaries of the Mansabdars were put on a month scale 10 months, 8 months, 6 months, or even less than that, and their obligations for the maintenance of a quota of Savars were brought down accordingly. Thus, a Mansabdar who had a rank of 3000 Jat, 3000 Savar, and maintained 1000 Savars under the rule of one third mentioned above would normally have had to maintain 2200 horses under the rule introduced by Akbar. But if he was put on a 10-month scale, he would maintain only 1800 horses and for 5 months only 1000 horses. It was rare for anyone to get allowances for less than 5 months or for more than 10 months. The month scale had little to do with the decline in the income of the Jagir, for the month scale was applied not only to Jagirs but also to those who were paid in cash during Shah Jahan's reign. The area under cultivation increased, production of cash crops also increased. The Zamadami, that is the income of the Jagir, also increased. But the increase kept pace broadly with a price rise during the period. It may be noted that most of the Marathas who were inducted into the Mughal service were assigned mansabs on a 5 monthly basis or even less. In this way, while they were given a high rank in the heraldry, the actual number of horses and effective savars was much less than was indicated by their rank. The availability of remounts was, as we have seen during Shah Jahan's reign, must therefore have adversely affected the efficiency of the Mughal cavalry. The Mansabdari system of the Mughals was a complex system. Its efficient functioning depended upon a number of factors, including the proper functioning of the dog branding system and of the Jagirdari system. If the dog system worked badly, the state would be cheated. If the Jamadami was inflated or the Jagirdar was not able to get the salary due to him, he would be disaffected, and he would not maintain his due contingent. On balance, the Mansabdari system worked properly under Shah Jahan on account of his meticulous attention to administration and selection of men, including the appointment of highly competent persons as wazirs, careful attention to the choice of right persons for the service, a strict discipline and a definite system of promotion and rewards made the Mughal nobility a loyal and, on the whole, a highly dependable body which was able to discharge the duties of administration and to defend and expand the empire. The Mughal army. The cavalry, as we have noted, was the principal arm of the Mughal army, and the Mansabdars provided the overwhelming proportion of it. In addition to the Mansabdars, the Mughal emperors used to entertain individual troopers called Ahadis. The Ahadis have been called gentlemen troopers and received much higher salaries than other troopers. They were a highly trusted corps, being recruited directly by the emperors and having their own muster master. And Ahadi mustered up to 5 horses, though sometimes two of them shared a horse. The duties of Ahadis were of a miscellaneous character. Most clerks of the imperial officers, the painters of the court, the foremen in the royal karkanas belonged to these crops. Many were appointed as adjutants and carriers of imperial orders. In Shah Jahan's reign, they numbered 7,000 and were often sent into the fighting line where they were well distributed over the different parts of the army. Many of them worked as skilled musketeers, barak andas, and bowmen, tir andas. In addition to the ahadis, the emperors maintained a corps of royal bodyguards, wala shahis, and armored palace guards. They were cavalrymen but served on foot in the citadel and the palace. The footmen, Paidakhan, formerly numerous but miscellaneous body, many of them consisted of matlock bearers, bandakwichi, and received salaries ranging between 3 and 7 rupees a month. This was the infantry proper, but the foot soldiers also included porters, servants, new runners, swordsmen, wrestlers, and slaves. The slaves, though not as numerous as during the Sultan period, were clothed and fed by the emperor or by a prince. Sometimes a slave could become a gentleman trooper, but generally, foot soldiers had a low status. The Mughal emperors had a large stable of war elephants and also a well organized bark of artillery. The artillery consisted of two sections, heavy guns which were used for defending or assaulting forts. These were often clumsy and difficult to move. The second was the light artillery, which was highly mobile and moved with the emperor whenever he wanted. The Mughals were solicitous of improving their artillery, and many Ottomans and Portuguese were employed in the artillery department. By the time of Aurangzeb, Mughal artillery had improved considerably, and foreigners found employment in the artillery department with difficulty. The big guns were sometimes extravagantly large in size, but as a modern writer says, these huge guns made more noise than they did harm. They could not be fired many times in a day and were very liable to burst and destroy the men in charge. However, the Frenchman Bernier, who accompanied Shah Jahan to Lahore and Kashmir, found the light artillery, called artillery of the stirrup, to be extremely well appointed. He says it consisted of 50 small field pieces, all of brass, each piece mounted on a well made and handsomely painted carriage containing two ammunition boxes and drawn by two fine horses. With a third horse in reserve, artillery or swivel guns were also mounted on elephants and camels. It is difficult to estimate the strength of the Mughal army. It consisted under Shah Jahan of about 2 lakh cavalry, excluding the men working in the districts and with the Fauzdars. It rose to 2,40,000 under Aurangzeb. The infantry under Shah Jahan, excluding the non-fighting people, was placed at 40,000 and may have been maintained at a similar figure under Aurangzeb. How efficient was the Mughal army as compared to the neighboring West and Central Asian states and the European states of the time? It is difficult to answer this question, though a number of European travelers, such as Bernier, have made adverse remarks about the efficiency of the Mughal army. A careful analysis shows that these remarks were really directed towards the Mughal infantry, which had no drill or discipline, was ill organized and ill led, and resembled a rabble. The development of the infantry had taken a different road in Europe. With the development of the flint gun, the infantry became a formidable fighting force during the 17th century and could even outclass the cavalry as the Indian powers were to realize to their cost during the 18th century. The success of the Mughals against the Uzbeks, who could match themselves with the Persian at the time of the Balkh campaigns, suggests that the Mughal army was not inferior to the Central Asian and Persian armies in an open contest. But the armies of these states were backward as compared to the Europeans, particularly in the fields of infantry and artillery. Though somewhat deficient in the field of artillery by the time of Aurangzeb, the Mughals had apparently caught up with the Asian powers, though not with the European seagoing powers. The Mughals, including the Asian powers except Turkey and the Sultanate of Oman, were deficient in the naval sphere, particularly in the field of sea warfare. The army as a whole, particularly the cavalry, was closely linked with the Jagirdari system, which in turn was based on the feudal system of land relations prevalent in the country. Ultimately, the strength and efficiency of one depended on the other. Thank you.